Like he's a real Dane. He's like
Yeah.
a
He's
stocky,
charismatic.
yeah, a stocky kind of physically imposing kind of figure that, and in fact, when Jacobe is first falling in love with him, it's kind of she's got this, and I love, she's my favorite character, I
She's a great
guess, in the
character.
book.
She's a really
Yeah,
great character, I think. Yeah.
and she has almost this animal attraction to him. Hi, and welcome back to the Big Book Project. My name is Lori Feathers, and I'm so pleased to have with me today Nick Doring. Nick is publicist at New York Review of Books, and he's here today to talk to me and to all of you out there about A Fortunate Man by Henrik Pontoppidan. And Nick, I was just saying before we started recording that I'm really happy to have an opportunity to talk to someone about this book. Folks, it's a chunky guy, but it is so good, and I just think that the panorama of both a man's um, coming of age and his evolution as a person, along with the evolution of Denmark at the time, around the turn of the 20th century. It's just a really fantastic portrait of how those two things kind of sometimes go together and sometimes are in conflict with each other.
I agree.
Yeah. So maybe just a little bit of preliminaries before we get into the plot of the book. Um, NYRB published another book by Pontoppidan, I think on the same date, right, in June of this
Yeah.
year. And that's called The White Bear.
There's two kind of novellas. It's called The White Bear, but it's really The White Bear and another short story, um, which was called The Rear Guard.
Okay, okay. And both it and A Fortunate Man, which we'll be talking mostly about today, are translated by Paul Larkin. I thought the translation was excellent. Um, I I did note though that back in 2019 there was another version, English translation of this book that was published, and that at the time the book was titled Lucky Pear, and it was translated by Naomi Leibowitz. I understand as well that in 2019 there was a film that was made called Lucky Pear as well. Do you know anything about kind of why this title versus the other?
I think Paul Larkin, the translator, says that Pontoppidan wanted A Fortunate Man, or whatever the Danish equivalent is, to be the title. And perhaps there were two editions, or perhaps the editor of the original Danish edition didn't like A Fortunate Man and wanted it to be more, I don't know, unusual and kind of distinctive, and so decided on Lucky Pair. Um, and so I think it often has been known as Lucky Pair, but Paul says that Pontoppidan really thought the title should be A Fortunate Man.
Okay, all right. So you're being true to his intent then, I
We have
guess.
to stick with our translator. I haven't read. Yeah, I mean, I know that there was another translation, and we did another Danish book with Paul by an author. Sorry, I'm gonna have to look this up. Um, a Danish author named Martin Hansen called The Liar, and I think it's a wonderful book and a great translation as well. Um, I think Paul had done this translation before the Pontoppidan of A Fortunate Man that maybe did get published in a quite small. Paul is Irish, although he worked in the he worked in the maybe it's not the merchant marines. He worked in ships for a long time, and I think with Danish, maybe with a Danish boat or Danish sailors or a Danish company, and that's where he learnt Danish. And but he's Irish and he lives in Ireland, and maybe this translation did get published by a small Irish press, so it was around, and we like Paul, so we decided to do it.
Good. I was not familiar with Henrik Pontoppidan.
Me neither.
And he won the Nobel Prize
Yeah.
in 1917, which, when you think about what was happening not very far away from Denmark in 1917, the Russian Revolution, and all the upheaval post World War One, that's kind of an amazing time to have won the Nobel. This particular novel, A Fortunate Man, was serialized, I understand, from the materials that come with the book, and over a number of years. And then the novel actually was published in Denmark in 1905. Um, so I'm not an expert about Denmark at that time, but it was really remarkable to me to kind of learn um, how, I guess you'd say, backwoods all of Denmark was, except for Copenhagen, it seems. Uh, Very rural, and there were a bunch of, I guess you might call them young Turks, that wanted to kind of shake things up, that saw all these advancements happening in the rest of Europe, industrialization and new ideas. And uh, Denmark just seemed to be stuck in this very agricultural, very fishing kind of culture and economy and mentality, and they thought that
And pigs, right? Are they always talking about
oh
farming
yes,
pigs?
yes, yeah. So uh, that comes into conflict for our protagonist here, Pear, as well. Pear grows up with a in a very Christian fundamentalist home. His father is a pastor, and he's got a ton of brothers and sisters.
He's
And
strict.
yeah, early on, Pear's the person in the family that kind of rebels, and he finally decides that he has to leave the confines of this overbearing pastor father and the very kind of conservative environment that permeates the whole house. And so I think he's 16 or so when he leaves home.
I think so, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he goes to to a city before he gets to Copenhagen, and he wants to be an engineer. uh, and he studies for a bit, but perhaps isn't this great student. But he has this idea while he's studying, this plan that he's going to um, kind of build some infrastructure in the area where he grew up. I'm probably not going to pronounce it correctly. Is it Jutland?
Sure.
Okay, the south of Denmark, south of Copenhagen, and the part that kind of sticks up in a peninsula and it is borders Germany. And he's got an idea that big ships, should be able to come down into that area and be able to do trade, because right now all the trade that occurs, but it's still not a lot for Denmark at the time, is happening, in Copenhagen. And so uh, that kind of plan, I think, dominates his thinking and all of his motivation for about the first, I guess, the first half of the book.
Yeah.
Um, And I don't know a lot about, kind of the geography and what this would entail to kind of, you know, reconstruct the fjords and open them up to large scale shipping. But it seems to be a very radical plan. And also pairs kind of, I guess you would say, burdened by this last name that he has, Sidinius, which is the name of a long line of pastors and very conservative. I think they're all Lutheran. Is that your
Yeah,
understanding?
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and so when everyone hears the name, they just kind of already know that he's from that family, and that kind of shades their perspective a little bit. Um, but this really isn't, I don't know. In a way, it's a coming of age novel, but in a way, it kind of isn't. And I was struck by the very good afterword to the your edition of the book by Fleming Barrett, and he calls the novel uh, the kind of story of Pear's regressive development. And I don't know. Do you think that's a fair statement? And how would you kind of describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I part of it seems to me a part of it is that, and maybe what makes it different from a traditional coming of age book is it's quite psychological, and it's definitely, even though it may be written in 1905, it feels it's got that strange. It's kind of a 19th century realist novel, hence and length of one, but it's also got a very modern tone to it, and the modernity comes out, as you're talking about with the interest in technology and progress and all that. But there's also this in the character development, I guess, that Pear is obviously quite depressive, as we would say now. I mean, yeah, I don't know if we want to spoil the end, but even in the beginning when he's young and kind of virile, and his name is Lucky. He's always called Lucky or a fortunate man, and things go well with him, and he's incredibly handsome and tall and physically fit, um, and women love him. But he's always a bit depressed, and he struggles to uh, make decisions, and he struggles to do things, which, I guess maybe there are kind of part of the Bildungsroman, but it doesn't end with him kind of coming to terms and getting over his kind of psychological issues and achieving what he can achieve, or at least being content in life at all. So that I felt like is kind of interesting about it and makes it a bit different than some of the other similar books.
Yeah, I read a review by James Wood, and he was actually reviewing the 2019 Lucky Pear English translation by Everyman. But he um, he said that I think he referred to it as Pear's oscillation. And there is, I was thinking of it more in terms of inconstancy, and it is, you almost want to strangle him at some points, because he flits back and forth between, I flit is not the right word, struggles, I guess, between wanting to be this modern man, and uh, Denmark has got to rise up and get with the program here and quit being such a sleepy backwater. But his psychological problems that you're talking about are are often wrapped around um, this sundering that happens by his own initiative. I mean, he instigated it. He did it with his family and this conservative tradition. And he often, I think, has this guilty complex, almost like a Catholic complex, perhaps, about, oh, should I be out here pursuing these projects, and these projects are going to require my personal prominence and personal wealth on my part, and is that okay to do? And then, oh no, that doesn't feel right, because really I'm a boy of the land, and I love nature, and that's not really what being a Dane is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I guess I hadn't thought about it before. I read this book earlier in the summer, and I had a little bit of time to glance through it. But again, just before, the idea of religion is quite interesting because I would, it's not a religious book, and Pear is not religious, even though his father is very, and his other siblings, but he does kind of sacrifice himself over and over, at least a couple times. When he's on the cusp of material, prosperity and happiness, he can't do it. He does kind of sacrifice himself. You know, ostensibly he's arguing that he's doing it for the benefit of others and making the right moral choice, because if they were, say, to marry him, or stick with him through old age, they would be miserable because he is such a miserable person. But it does also just feel like he's sacrificing him. It is kind of self-martyrizing and sacrificial, which does feel a bit religious, and something that you know even his kind of quite pious father wouldn't approve of.
Right. Um, and and then that inconstancy is definitely, I think, the case with his engagement to Jacobe. So um, she's a very wealthy daughter of a prominent Jewish family, and at first he's not at all physically attracted to her, and um, I do think he does in some ways fall in love with her. It's not just, I don't get the sense,
Definitely,
at
I think
least,
he
that it's
definitely does.
it's not just motivated by money.
No.
But uh, he kind of struggles with his feelings for her too, and she really she really in a lot of ways mentors, I think, his intellectual development, because he when he first meets her and starts coming to um, her family's home, because he becomes acquainted with her brother. um, he's very crude and loud, and kind of makes these scenes at dinners, with very prominent people at the family house. He drinks too much. He's just, I guess, generally uncouth. And then she kind of he observes her, and they talk together. She isn't It's not like love at first sight for her either. Um, and she kind of, I think, teaches him a bit about how to think about um, the political structures in the country, and how some people need to be stroked in order to kind of she becomes very, I think, invested in this big project that he has, as does her brother. And they're like very much believe in it, and they're willing to kind of sacrifice a lot regarding their own personal reputations, and just kind of putting up with him as well. But then the arc of his development kind of kind of peaks, I guess, his intellectual development in some ways peaks with her, and then they kind of, I don't think I'm giving too much away. They kind of there's some differences that occur to the ways they start thinking about the world. Mostly, I guess, because he's continually drawn back to this kind of um, provincial kind of ethos and understanding about what it means to be a Dane, and where what his role is.
Yeah. I mean, he's also he's a romantic in the capital R form of it. Another kind of amazing thing about this book is that it has, you know, rationality and psychology, but it also has like romance and art and big idea engineering projects and all of it. I mean, it's a big book, but all of this is in one novel, which I think is probably what makes it so amazing. But yeah, he's a romantic who cannot compromise. And so if anybody at a social event or at the work meeting, um he thinks is being insincere or doing something for their own benefit, rather than say, swallow his pride and be like, whatever, don't say anything, let that person have their 5 minutes, and the project will go through to, build this new harbor that theoretically it suggested is going to revolutionize Danish industry and improve a lot of the country. And he can't swallow his pride, and he has to explode in a fit of rage and anger, ruining, you know, all of his chances. While Jacoby, sophisticated, kind of, I mean, I was going to say cosmopolitan, but she's not really cosmopolitan. She's Jewish, and she she's more worldly than him, and she says, "Don't, swallow your pride and don't do it, and let's just move on. It's not a huge deal." And she, of course, has her own demons, anti-Semitism, and partially anti-Semitism, but also her own anxieties and self-consciousness and lack of self-esteem, because she's Jewish in Denmark in the turn of the century, which must have been a serious minority. Um, and I guess that he she has a lesson. He doesn't think that in a way she has a lesson for him, as you were saying, that he didn't expect, and that kind of does seem to cause the blossoming of the romance. But I definitely think they're in love, and some of the great, I think the best scenes in the book are, well, I don't know if it's totally spoiling, because this is probably about halfway through an 800-page novel. But in when they're in the Alps, and they're having a wonderful time. Do you remember the scene? And they're having a wonderful time, and they're walking up and down, and it's just the two of them, and they're in the house. It's beautiful, and they don't have any family or friends or any pressures around, and they're staying in kind of down market, small little hostels or whatnot, and having sex and good food, and getting incredibly hungry after walking up and down mountains. And but then for some reason he still can't, in the moment of what would imagine his happiness, he can't quite um, um, fulfill it, and then he kind of rejects her, and then, or half rejects her, and then later, when that's I thought that scene was amazing, and the other part where he really does reject her, when he goes back to Denmark and she's at her family's beautiful country house on the coast, and at these kind of glamorous parties, and again, and she's still, even though he's treated her very badly, he goes away, he stays away from her for a long time, ostensibly to learn in Germany and stuff about engineering and kind of cosmopolitan and European, continental European, I don't know, advances. But he's really treats her awfully because he doesn't contact her. He comes back, and she's willing to accept him back, even though her feelings have been really hurt, and he still fucks it up.
Yeah, he's constantly undermining himself, it seems. Um, but I don't know. Do you think that's because he doesn't really understand what is going to make him happy? So he keeps saying like, "Oh, well, I'm going to get this project, accepted and financed and implemented." And then he kind of sabotages that. And then it's like, oh, I'm going to uh you know kind of live this. He kind of falls in love with her whole Jacoby's whole family, and all the opulence of it, and the way that the conversation is so sophisticated, and the freedom that they kind of uh, demonstrate with in terms of their dress and their mores. And then And then he kind of he well, not kind of, I think he totally sabotages her relationship with her and their
Yeah.
engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a depressive, and so that's part of the reason. And also, um, he's a depressive and a kind of idealist, romantic idealist who, if if his big, if his worth is going to become manifested by this big project, but that means coming to terms with the capitalists who are going to pay for it, and they are kind of shitty capitalists, so that's not great. But and also it's that I guess there's an understanding that you know even one person's great idea that he does when he's young and broke, staying up all night, doing figures and stuff, which is this kind of work of genius in a way. In the end, it becomes a kind of, it's not quite as perfect and kind of crystal clear as that. You have to compromise with all of the bureaucracy and finance and stuff, and he can't quite. And maybe you lose, maybe, and you get criticized, in the press. No matter what, there are opponents. No matter what, maybe it's jealousy and envy, but there still are, and he can't quite accept having to go through that. I mean, it's politics. It's he can't get into the back and forth of politics, because that's not him. And so when he's ever at the stage of having to do that, he just kind of gives up.
Why do you think that uh, that he's lucky or fortunate?
Yeah. Do you think maybe it's slightly ironic?
I don't know. He seems to me. I mean, his he does overcome all of these obstacles of his childhood and becomes a very known figure in Copenhagen. Um, but it seems that just when things are at his fingertips, he it's not always his fault, but oftentimes they they're outside of his grasp, either because again he's self-sabotaging, or something happens, you know, like he finds out that the big capitalist guy that's going to finance this really doesn't want him to have control of the project, or isn't willing to give him control. He just wants to take the project and kind of do with it what he wants to
Yeah.
do.
He's got his own
um,
agenda.
yeah, exactly. So to me, the irony here in a way is with this character, Otto During. So Otto is married to Jacobe's sister Nanny, who's this wildly attractive, extremely flirtatious woman, and they kind of have a marriage. I don't know whether you'd say it's an open marriage, but they're both kind of out there doing what they want romantically, even though they're married. But Otto, just his star just seems to keep rising. He starts out as this, he gets this break as a journalist, and he's willing to write anything that the business interests want him to write, whether it's true or not, or um, you know, e- especially if it's scandalous. He's just kind of interested in his own career. And until the end, I think, I mean, he's not always a prominent character in every 100 or so pages of the book as we progress through, but there is mention of him and how he just keeps kind of getting promoted, um, without really, it seems like, any consciousness, or any kind of uh, uh, guilt, or he's not a contemplative person, I guess. And I guess what we know from reading, being inside of Pear's head, like for so many pages, I know that Pear's a very contemplative person.
Yeah. Also, I guess he doesn't. The brother-in-law doesn't really produce anything. He's a very successful journalist, but the implication is he's writing. He's smart and he writes whatever he knows the audience wants to hear, and he follows the political headwinds. But he's not actually creating anything worthwhile. Unlike Pear, who's not an artist either. He's an engineer and he's good at maths. And but there's also the first click. You were calling the Young Turks, the 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 artists, who are also kind of romantic, and they are they're the enfant terrible of Copenhagen, and they don't follow conventions, and they kind of act a bit like Vikings, intentionally, but 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 they're meant to be, at least the main guy, Fritjof, I think his name was, that is meant to be a good artist, and an
Yes.
important, and like Pear is doing in technology and science and engineering, bringing Denmark out of this, as out of a backward, kind of backwards, place. The artists are trying to do that as well by going away from, I don't know, whatever school that had been dominant in Denmark before that, and they are also kind of presented as romantics too.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess
It,
the sorry, I didn't interrupt. But I guess the fortunate, for the audience who maybe haven't read it, the general kind of implication is that Pear is very fortunate because he is he might have some problems, and it comes clear. I think he is depressed, and psychologically has quite a hard time, really. But he's good at math, hence he can succeed and become and make these incredible plans that are, the reader is meant to suggest would work. He's very tall and handsome and good looking. Women always fall in love with him, no matter how badly he behaves, and and people like him. He always finds, he's lucky to find, patrons. Jacobe's brother, being one of them, but he's always got friends, and supporters.
yeah. There is mention of his physicality. It it happens quite a bit, and I, I think that we're to understand that he's not just a kind of dainty kind of specimen of, like, the bon vivant type. Like, he's a real Dane. He's like
Yeah,
a
he's
stocky,
charismatic.
yeah, a stocky kind of physically imposing kind of figure and in fact, when Jacobe is first falling in love with him, it's kind of, she's got this, and she's my favorite character,
She's
I
a great
guess, in the
character.
book.
She's a really
Yeah,
great character, I think. Yeah,
and she has almost this animal attraction to him because she, up till then, she's kind of, I don't know, she kind of almost seems, in a way, not, I don't know, this is putting it uh, too much on it, but a little bit of spinsterish. Like, she's not her sister Nanny, where Nanny is kind of like very flirtatious and always flitting here and there. Jacoby kind of stays at home, likes to read her books, and this kind of uh, physical attraction to Pear, kind of, even though it's not there initially, when it she grows into that, it kind of startles her and takes her
yeah.
by surprise.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a great. Again, I think it's the best part of the book is their relationship, and it's not the only part of the book for those listening. But yeah, she's quite damaged, um, by, yeah, as I said, by anti-Semitism, or at least her esteem, out of fear of anti-Semitism, and 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 hasn't had any positive, healthy relationships. And he is the sexy, very Danish guy, and then they have this attraction to each other, and it opens up her world in a kind of physical, you know, warm, hot way, and it opens up his world in a kind of supportive, she's supportive and understanding, and sympathetic and intellectual and wise, and so it's this kind of amazing relationship, which when he blows it, it is a bit of a, as you say, it is a little bit hard to. I mean, I guess could this be the criticism of the book? Why would he do this? Why would he give up this relationship, which seems pretty incredible? Not only are they in love, and she absolutely worships him and is going to help him. Um, she also, her family is wealthy, and he really blows it.
He really does. And I don't know, do you think he can't get over her Jewishness, or do you think it's that he understands that she'll never have the same relationship to the land and the rural kind of Denmark that he feels in his blood? He treats her, or I don't know if he treats her, but he thinks of her, I think, a lot as a foreigner. Like she's not really Danish because she's Jewish.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's because he's depressive, and some of it is his own problems. I mean, obviously there are problems in the relationship because he is interested in other women and seducing other women, and still kind of half interested in her sister. Can't be good relationship. So there are some, but I think a lot of it is his depression and his inability to accept, what could be good. Although again, would having to be compromised because he'd have to get married and then enter a world. And I guess, yeah, he there's always he always has a bit of a worry that if he were to marry her into her wealthy Jewish family, he would always be seen as this, perhaps, lucky, but also he would be the outsider. He'd be the kind of, animal at the zoo, who joined this sophisticated, well-heeled, wealthy family that he does not come from, and wouldn't fit in, and perhaps that is a slight issue, but he does seem to accept it otherwise. I mean, he's been going, at the point that they break up, he's been hanging out at their family parties for years.
Yes, yeah. Um, I couldn't help make some comparisons to Tolstoy.
Yeah.
I mean, eh, of course, the capaciousness of the book is one comparison that you could make to Anna Karenina or War and Peace. But there's times that Pear seems a little bit like Pierre Bezukhov, and this kind of philosophy that Tolstoy had, uh, that you're only like really a true Russian if you have this kind of innate kind of I don't know, that being a nationality, it comes like from the earth, comes from the soil, and there's a lot of this when we see Pierre kind of going back and forth. Between whether he wants to kind of uh, lead kind of a devout life or whether he wants to be a worldly person. Um, but almost some of the people that influence him after his father, when he turns totally away from religion for a period of years, but later in life, is this kind of faith, God, Mother Nature kind of thing. I just thought it was interesting because in a lot of other novels that take place during this time period, like if they're French or German or English, Italian, Spanish, I kind of feel like there's not this really innate sense of being connected to the land. And the only thing I could compare it to was Russia and Tolstoy.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think that Ibsen, and I guess Strindberg or whatever would be influenced too. And I'm not an expert in this stuff, but I do think the coming to terms with modernity and you know, the and I guess, yeah, Chekhov too, in this way, that we're all, you know, humans now. We've had the Enlightenment. We no longer believe in God, and we live our orderly lives based on science and reason. But of course, that often fails too. I would have thought, you know, it's going around what I imagine is kind of Ibsen and Chekhov and stuff, and the kind of problems that they have in their social lives. Um, I assume those the Ibsen would have been a big influence.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to disclose how the book ends. I guess I'll just say though that it's not at all like a twee type of ending, and eh, I was kind of expecting like a reconciliation with
Yeah,
the
but I think we
family,
can.
and
Can we tell the audience about not the end, but the second relationship? Because there is a whole other part to this book which we haven't even mentioned yet.
yes, go ahead.
Um, well, after and I didn't when I was doing my revision, I didn't get to this part, so feel free to correct me here. After he breaks off with Jacoby, and then gives up this big plan to revolutionize Danish industry and transport and shipping, which again seems to be suggested would work and be a big success, and he would become a, you know, national um, historic figure hero. He he moves he kind of moves back home to Jutlandy area, but he doesn't. He hangs out with some. He meets some old aristocrats who he knew, and then he meets in that area a pastor, the opposite of his father. His father, again, is kind of a fundamentalist, very strict, um, you know, very severe Lutheran Christianity. This pastor is happier, more relaxed, more social. Does a great job. But this part is a bit like this is what I imagine for English. You know, this is like the kind of Trollope or George Eliot or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you know, he gets on well with the aristocrats. He's often going over to theirs for dinner. They come over for his for dinner. You know, all of the high society of this rural area are coming to his church, which I feel like Pear's dad was not getting that crowd. And he has a beautiful daughter. And Pear doesn't respect him because, you know, he thinks all the things that I've just kind of described. But he does have a beautiful daughter, and Pear and her fall in love and get married and have a family.
Yeah. Um, his name is Pastor Blumberg, and the daughter's name is Inger. And I guess it's Pastor Blumberg that I think is kind of, to me, feels like this Tolstoyan
Yeah,
character, you know? Um, but it is also interesting that unfortunately, our friend Pear can't leave well enough alone. And there's this pastor that also is nearby, and he's kind of seen as a kook. His name is Pastor, how am I going to pronounce this? Shattering? Shattering. And uh, Pear kind of avoids him for a while because the story of the Pastor Blumberg crew is that, oh, that guy is pastor of a neighboring church, but he's like really out there. Fetterging's kind of philosophy seems to be that if you're a real Christian, you're plagued with these doubts all the time, and so you should be, and you need to be constantly questioning everything, including your own faith, and that's okay. But Pear kind of gets turned off by Pastor Blumberg eventually because he hears some things about him, about how he's not treated his father well, Blumberg's own father, and some other things. So he kind of gets disillusioned with with this new hero that he puts on a pedestal, as well. And I don't know. Do you think that he ever truly loves Inger, or he just kind of loves what she represents?
Yeah, I took it that he fell in love with her. Yeah. Um I mean, it definitely feels like a return to, I mean, when you were talking about love of nature and the land, that part when he's with her, that's what that came to mind, that they're living there. He's left Copenhagen behind. He's left the city and the social life. I mean, there is social life, but it's not quite the exciting artists and journalists and politicians. And but they live in a beautiful part of the world, and they have a nice house, and she's beautiful, and he's handsome, and their kids are attractive, and everything is seems, and they're not wealthy or famous, and he has periods of he has depressive attacks periodically where he remembers his youthful ambitions and gets a bit depressed again. But they go away, and she's quite supportive of it, and they're going along. Yeah, and we won't tell you what happens, but something does
Yeah.
happen. If you want to,
Uh,
here's my sales pitch. Um, Something
it's
happens.
a it's a good one. It's a cliffhanger. I guess I'll just say that in the chapter that closes with their marriage, the very first line on the next chapter, and my jaw dropped. It was like, the first months of married life with Inga were not happy, and I was like, oh no, here we go again.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So you like the book?
yeah, I loved the book,
Yeah,
and it's so easy to read.
yeah,
It doesn't put you through any kind of I don't know, kind of uh, puzzles or struggles. I mean, you are kind of I was uh, rather frustrated with this guy at times, but he's a super complex guy, and so is Jacoby, and uh, the that just makes the best kind of novel to me when you get this so much interiority of how people think and how their opinions and their perceptions change based on their own evolution and what's going on around them, the context in which they live. I thought it was amazing.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, and as we kind of started off with the background historical moment of Denmark, which I didn't know anything about either, but it's totally fascinating. And once you start reading it, you do feel like, oh, I get it. This Denmark is a small country, and it's the backwater, and the people there are hoping to get out of that and become a kind of major modern nation. Plus, it's not, there are all of these other characters, that we've kind of mentioned briefly, but it's a big panorama of people.
Yeah, there are literally dozens of characters. And I mean, it's not just the case that there's like a single mention of them. I mean, they come we spend so much time with Pear and Jacobe that's these characters kind of come through. A lot of them are I take it from the afterword, and the afterword to this book is excellent. So I'm so glad that you included it. I'm so glad that it's an afterword and not an introduction, because
I always do
some
introductions last anyway.
right. I should do that more often, because so often I start, I was like, oh, that's a really cool person that they got to write this introduction, and then I'm always kind of disappointed that I read it. Um, where was I going with this?
The different characters and the afterward.
Yeah, yeah. There are just a lot of them, and they all kind of they're not just throwaway characters. Like they're in there for a reason. Um, do you guys have any plans to publish more of his work?
I don't know. Um, I don't know. I mean, this book is so big that I would imagine probably not.
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
I get it. I get it. Although I did seem to indicate that that he considered like three books to be, and this is included in it, kind of like a loose trilogy.
mm,
Um, that's indicated in the afterword, and it sounded like, in particular, the one that like comes after this. Sounded really good. Is it the Promised Land or
yeah,
something else? But I think, or the Kingdom of the Dead.
yeah.
It says Puppet. Pontoppidan made clear that his epic novels, The Promised Land, A Fortunate Man, and the last big novel, The Kingdom of the Dead, should broadly be seen as a trilogy. In this trilogy, moreover, the author, as Pontoppidan put it himself, attempted to paint a cohesive picture of modern Denmark and the attitudes to life and the fate of its people. Yeah, I would definitely read more by him. So maybe before I let you go,
Mm,
this is the Big Book Project,
yeah.
and if I have to think about publishers that have the guts and the grit to publish really big novels, always at NYRB at the top of my list. So, can you tell me about some big ones that you might have coming out this fall or early next year?
Yeah. Before we do, I was trying to preface. You probably do know this. You know how there's a bit of a, dare I say, a troubling trend where people are very interested in short books. Have you talked
Yeah,
about this on your other shows? I mean, obviously, and I have no problem with short books or long books, but it seems that, yeah, it seems like if one works in a publishing house or a bookstore, customers are going to be like, I'm looking for something that's great and short.
you know, I don't know if that's the case.
Mm,
What I get very frustrated with as the book buyer at my bookstore in
mm,
Dallas is that it seems that the big publishers have this, uh, and they all seem to have, I don't want to say collude, but someone has figured out that like the sweet spot for a 28.99 uh, book or so in hardcover for a new book is somewhere between like 270 and 335 pages, and it seems like everything gets pushed into that kind of of page limitation that some crack consulting group has probably said like, well, if it's shorter than that, people don't really think they're getting their value, to spend almost $30. And if it's longer than that, people, kind of feel overwhelmed, like, I don't know if I've got time to finish that. I don't know if I'll ever finish it. But um, I don't know. I'm
yeah,
always a proponent for big books. I'm glad that you guys are still publishing them.
yeah, yeah. And I guess obviously publishers have a bit of an angst about the production costs of producing a really big book, and then if nobody buys it, they've spent much more money on the book, so that is the
Yeah.
risk. But yeah, it is a bit of a bummer if that's the case. Big books from NYRB. Uh, One that has just come out recently, which I have read, is called Bamazo by an Argentine writer named,
I've got it here. I wrote it
yeah.
down because it's
Um,
definitely one that I want to read. Tell me about it.
it's it's well, we were debating about whether it's historical fiction or fantasy. It's about there's a there's a garden in an old aristocratic estate, baronship, whatever, in Umbria, I think, in Italy, that this count built these. It's called they call it Sacro Bosco now, sacred woods. But there were these big rocks, and he had people and he hired people to carve them out into kind of monsters. And there, so there's the famous one um, of a big kind of monster with this big mouth that that everybody you can walk into. I'm going to put the I know this is not there's the message in there is the
Okay.
website of it. And so yeah, there's this count from the 16th century, maybe the 15th century, so late Renaissance, um, built it, but nobody knows anything about him. So Manuel Mujica Lainez, this Argentine writer, who's definitely kind of part of the Latin boom. He's friends with Cortázar and all those people. Um, he he writes a novel about this guy's life and the building of these kind of crazy sculptures in his life, not knowing anything about him. For example, he makes him a cripple, but he doesn't know this. um and his adventures, he goes to Florence and he spends time with the Medicis, and he meets up with famous artists of the time, and there's all these wars going on, and, the kind of the Italian states are battling, and the Pope is a warrior, and there's like all these wars going on, as well as the arts and kind of flourishing, and these amazing Italian cities, Renaissance cities, states kind of having, and it's got all of that, as well as but it's all kind of made up. So it feels, I kind of think of it as historical fiction, but you can't totally read it as fiction because it feels very, persuasive to me about what life would have been like there and then. Um, but the character, nobody knows anything about this character, so it's kind of it's really great fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. The other really big one, which I haven't read yet, is Gabriela Turgit's Effingers or Effingers, a German writer. We published a book by her called Beer Takes Berlin, which is much smaller. This one is really long. It sounds like, and I think it must be intentionally modeled on Thomas Mann's Buddenbrooks, um, about a Turgot was Jewish and fled Germany in the 30s, and so, she went to London, and she spent the rest of her life in London. And actually, I think she wrote this. I think she wrote the manuscript. She wrote the book while she was in Germany, or at least started, and then lost it and had to rewrite it
Oh,
after the war in London. And I think it probably came out in the early 50s. Um, and I haven't read it yet, but it's about, like Buddenbrooks. It's set in the it's about a Jewish. It's later than Buddenbrooks, in a time period. In fact, I think it's starts the day that the last Buddenbrook character dies. So it's obviously kind of meant to be a continuation in a way. But rather than the Buddenbrooks, they are German. They're Jewish Berlin commercial family living in Germany, three generations of them, ups and downs in their family's fortunes, marriages, and disasters and successes. And so it sounds pretty good.
I tried a taste of it,
Yeah.
just to kind of get a feel for it. I thought the writing was over the top good. It like
Okay, good.
really descriptive, really great, and we're always looking for more female authors of
Yeah.
big books. It seems that
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to find male authors of big
Yeah.
books. So
Yeah.
I definitely am really excited about the book. That comes out November 11th, I think, right?
November. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I know that I think she was quite well known in Germany in the Weimar period, and was pretty much forgotten um, after she died. But she's been rediscovered in Germany, similar to, not as long, but Melville House has published a Weimar period female writer named, I'm going to forget, but there's been a
It's
couple.
okay.
The Artificial Silk Girl, Irmgard Coin.
Okay.
Coin, Keun. And I think those are more, they're like Berlin in the 20s and 30s, like, flapper girls going
Uh,
around to parties and stuff like that, which this might not be, although maybe it will have some of that. Um, but yeah, I think she's been rediscovered recently too, and kind of an important German interwar writer. I think Turget is too.
yeah. Any that you can think of off the top of your head for early next year? that are big uns?
If you bear with me, I can look
I'm
it
putting you to the
up.
test. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I I have files. Um, big.
I kind of seem to remember uh, in your spring 2026 catalog, because I just did my buy for the store. There's one that's like a 600 pager that sounded,
Was it the Russian Kingdom of Agamemnon?
yeah, that might be it.
That one is probably big. I haven't. This guy is Vladimir Sharov, and he wrote. He's dead now, but
Yes.
it's he's died recently, so he's not kind of 20. He's I think probably 21st. Cusp of 21st 20th century Russian would have been around working in the Soviet era, but died recently, and he wrote the introduction or afterward to Platonov's Chevangor, and I think he'll be interested in. It'll be like this one a bit Russian history, religion, Christianity, mixing it going into Soviet, secularism and the disasters and all that kind of stuff. Maybe with a kind of metaphorical take on all this stuff, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I actually have read him before and wrote a review about one of his books, but
Oh, really?
this was quite a few years ago, and I can't even remember who I did the review
I'll look it up.
for. Is it Life After? Hmm. I might have reviewed it for World Lit Today
Okay.
or Rain Taxi or
Well, send it
I,
to
ca-
me. Um,
okay.
I'll use it in my press materials.
Yeah, yeah. He's he's a good author, so I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
Well, Nick, it's been so great to
Thank
talk
you for
to you
having me on.
today.
It
And
was fun. It was fun just having a chance to look back at The Fortunate Man and remembering how kind of incredible it is.
yeah, and I'm sorry that I I made you have to look back because we originally scheduled to do this probably much more contemporaneous with when you were reading and finished the book, but I just needed some more time because
That's
you do
okay.
have to spend quite a few hours with this
Yes, you
guy.
do. And I do recommend The White Bear and The Rearguard. They're, the Rearguard is got a similarity to A Fortunate Man. One of it's a and actually I guess Henry James, um one must think, is a little bit of an influence. In the Rearguard there's a painter, and he's a big brash rebel young Turk in Rome, in the Danish community, and he's married a wealthy, beautiful, kind of, from a conservative government family, a Danish woman, and they're not quite, even though they fall in love, and the sex is good, they're not quite aligned. I won't tell you what happens. And the White Bear is a different one. There's a kind of, it's a bit more like that last pastor, not Blumberg, but the other one. He's a rebel pastor. He gets sent to Greenland, because he's such a rebel that the church doesn't want something to do with him, and he goes native, um, and then he has to come, but then eventually he gets recalled home, and he has a hard time settling back into Denmark. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I think I heard you on the Mooks and Grapes podcast talking
Yeah,
about the white bear with Trevor and Paul
yeah,
a few
it's
months
pretty,
back.
it's pretty great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, really recommend A Fortunate Man and all the work by Henrik Pontoppidan, and um, go out and buy it at your
Yeah,
independent bookstore. And
yeah.
thanks, Nick. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.